distinguished gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sure that nobody who offered some of those other amendments thought they were trash. I think they probably thought they were pretty good. But let's just talk about just a couple things. I need to get into the record, Mr. Chairman. First of all, from Space Magazine from June 2nd, 2022, Elon Musk tells SpaceX Tesla workers they must be in office at least 40 hours a week. And also a report from the GAO entitled Federal Real Property Preliminary Results Show Federal Buildings Remain Underutilized Due to Longstanding Challenges and Increased Telework. So,
without objection, be entered in the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to respond to my colleagues talking about congestion, there are more people who come in every day because D.C. is open, so you got a lot of tourists coming in as well, and the buses really provided the congestion. And I don't know what happened last Tuesday, but that was ridiculous on 395. But anyway, let's just talk about the buildings for a second and the impact on telework. For me, the biggest question is productivity and constituent satisfaction in their interaction with the federal agency. Those are the two areas that really drive my thoughts on this matter. But I want to give it some context because this is testimony from earlier this year. The federal government spends about $2 billion a year to operate and maintain federal office buildings regardless of the building's utilization. $2 billion regardless of how much they're used. And we lease another $5 billion worth of buildings. Now, why is that important? We're leasing 511 million square feet of office space. That's what we get to. But of that amount, in 1,500 federally owned buildings, what we get to is this. 17 of the 24 federal agencies, use on average 25% or less of the capacity of their headquarter building, 25% or less. So in the highest range is still below 50%. So what that means is we are spending a bucket load of money that we either don't need to, shouldn't need to, and we need to lessen our footprint. The other thing is the productivity and the constituent interface that we have. Everybody up here probably gets calls every week like I do. We're having trouble with passports. We're having trouble with, you name it, OSHA, whatever it may be. And you guys were talking about, all of you were talking about different measures of productivity. And Mr. Ellis, you talked about somebody could even be removed. So I'm wondering how many people have been removed for failing to perform under teleworking conditions?
I cannot address specifically teleworking themselves, sir. I can tell you that in FY...
well, this is, Mr. Ellis, I don't mean to interrupt. Well, I do mean to interrupt. I don't want to be rude about it, but we are talking about teleworking. So that would be, I would be interested in that because all of you have said you have measures of productivity, you have measures,
right.
If somebody's watching the cat videos or whatever, you have ways to track and measure it. Some of you have said, well, we want the supervisor to just make sure that the work's getting done. Look, Congress itself, remember we're sitting in a hearing. I would always come. I never missed a day. We're doing a Zoom meeting one time. I'm sitting in the building, in this room, and there's a guy, and we're watching on the screen, and he's sitting there in his pajamas in a bed, right? The other, other people showing up on the boats. That doesn't deliver good constituent services. So I want to know what really is a real metric for determining whether constituents are satisfied. How are you measuring whether constituents that you deal with, who you interface with, are receiving proper and adequate service? How do we do it? Let's start with Mr. Dorman and then go down, please.
Yes, sir. I think probably the best analog there is our licensing caseload. And when we get an application from a licensee or applicant, we establish a schedule for the review and a level of effort associated with it because we are a fee recovery agency, and we communicate that to the licensees. And so we measure at the individual level what their contribution is to those actions. We roll it up at the program level and look at, are we meeting our metrics on that? So that's the productivity piece of it.
So just real quick, how has that changed pre-COVID to now? I mean, when you went to teleworking?
We have sustained and I'd say even slightly improved our performance in that area.
Mr. Chairman, can the rest answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. The gentleman will be extended that time to receive the answers that he's asked, seeking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At NASA, we're not a constituent-facing serving organization or agency. That's not necessarily what our mission is. So those metrics are a little bit different. But I will tell you that we look at telework and remote work and on-site work the same. The same rules apply. The same expectations of professionalism apply. The same rules of making sure you get your job done and service the mission apply. NASA is a very matrixed organization, heavily leveraged on a contracted workforce. At every level of our organization, there are checkpoints and there are sort of measures to ensure that we are performing according to plan. So the individual reports through an organization, through a mission directorate, and to the agency. And at the agency level, we have 6 independent measures looking at health, and we have 6 measures looking at overall agency performance. I will tell you, throughout the pandemic, there were costs of getting our work done, as there were in all of our lives. But the cost of getting the work done and the things that had to be overcome, as we all had to do, were overcome, and we were able to accomplish amazing things for the American public.
Thank you. Doctor?
At NSF, similar to NASA, we are not a constituent-facing agency. One of our measures of productivity is number of proposals processed. That number peaked in 2021 when we were at maximum telework throughout the agency. That's not the same, of course, as measuring the effectiveness of the agency, and we have new metrics in place to understand how we are reaching out and attracting in institutions who have not had track records with NSF to NSF, and in states like EPSCoR states and others. And we're embarking on a new customer service experience program to understand how our work with our customers, our principal investigators, is effective.
Look forward to seeing a copy of those guidelines, please.
For DHS, sir, for TSA, they have now reached, in the FY23, they've reached and exceeded their FY19 pre-pandemic levels. 6 of our 10 record throughput days at airports have occurred this year, and the service continues uninterrupted. I point out for FEMA, they've had 487 deployments this year involving 44,184 FEMA personnel to serve the American people. TSA pre-check, typically 600 enrollment locations, you get your service in less than 2 weeks, you can get an appointment, and you get your known traveler number no more than 3 to 5 days after that. My chief of staff recently just experienced that herself. So I think there are metrics we use to measure performance, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before the gentleman yields, would the gentleman like to cover those things with this panel that he is interested in receiving information back for, or would you like for me to attempt to give that dialogue at the end?
I think that'd be better if you gave it at the end. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you extending that courtesy. I think what I am intending to do is write maybe a follow-up letter with regard to some of the information that I've heard here today, and I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman is yield back his time. Thank you very much. The gentleman